So we have some important updates regarding COVID. Um, it appears, wait for a second here, I'll start over. Of course, I lost my glasses. There are some really important COVID updates. The New England Journal of Medicine, which is North America's most prestigious journal, very rarely retracts things, but they retracted the hydroxychloroquine paper that was published regarding it being dangerous and ineffective. The reason being is the company Surgisphere, they won't give us the data that they're using for this study, and there is kind of a conflict of interest because the doctor who is making these claims, I believe, works for Surgisphere, but they've retracted the paper, and the WHO has continued with the hydroxychloroquine study. They stopped that study because of this paper, and now we can't analyze the data. They refuse to give it to us. It kind of sounds like China. So because of that, they did publish a retraction, and at the very end of it, it says the very serious concerns being raised about the validity of the papers by Mayra et al., which is in everybody else who participated in the study. That's just how they label it in the scientific field. Need to be recognized and actioned urgently, and ought to bring about serious reflection on whether the quality of editorial and peer review is what these papers need to go through in order to have some validity. They can replicate these things, and they stand behind what the papers say. The quality of editorial and peer review during the pandemic has been adequate. Scientific publication must, above all, be rigorous and honest. In an emergency, these values are needed more than ever. So we're pushing for data that could be skewed, could not be complete because of pressure. So the WHO has started the hydroxychloroquine study back up because we cannot prove right now that it is dangerous. So that study is going. They've also talked about the cloth mask coverings. On my RT Says What page, I shared the video because there's a difference between what the CDC is saying and what the WHO is saying regarding cloth masks. And the reason being is that in other countries the WHO also shares their data with, they might not have the surgical masks available to use. But you can see in the video, it's a short video, that the guy speaks at all different levels, with and without a mask. And you can see the droplets and how far they actually go. So the cloth masks, if everybody is wearing them, it protects the spread of the droplets. It protects them from being spit all over you and from you being spit on by somebody else, inadvertently or whatever. So even though it's a cloth mask, it still provides some form of protection against the spread of the droplets. So there's a difference there, and that's why. They're also looking at vaccines. I'm going to share the reputable webpage that they're using, and it lists all the vaccines, what phase they're in of the clinical trials, their history, who's doing the study. It's got a lot of great information, so I'm going to share that. So, oh, Christine. So this is really important information that's going on. It's kind of gotten buried. I haven't been able to watch the news, but I haven't seen it come across my screen that there's these changes. But for the New England Journal of Medicine to retract a document, that's pretty important. When they questioned the doctor, he said, let me get to it. Let's see. he's making the claim that Certosphere serves as a data aggregator and performs data analysis on this data. We are not responsible for the source data. This is the labor-intensive task required for exporting the data from an electronic health record, converting it to the format required by our data dictionary, and fully de-identifying the data is done by the healthcare partner. And then the journal says, this appears to contradict the claim on the court's clinical website that it does all the work and successfully integrates your electronic health record, financial systems, supply chain, and quality programs into one platform. Desai, which is the doctor involved with the study and the paper, did not explain this apparent contradiction when the Guardian put it to him. And the Guardian is a website that's also reputable. So we have a very big question about the data that we can't get our hands on to analyze. So it's back. We don't know obviously what the outcome is going to be. So this is really big. This is very powerful. One of the vaccines that they're looking at is to do with the BCG vaccine, which is for tuberculosis, because they have noticed a trend that people who get this vaccine in childhood in these countries are not getting as sick, or they're not getting sick. So they're looking at a vaccine based off of that. I mean, there's a lot of vaccines, a lot of different methods. On medcram.com, they are doing live Q&A videos every Sunday with Dr. Schwelt. So very intelligent man. If you have a lot of questions that you need answered, you can log on to his live videos on Sundays and get your questions answered directly, just like we're kind of doing here. So this is really important. I'm going to share the vaccine website, and I'm going to share, I've already shared the droplet video, and that's really important to watch because that gives you a visual as to why this is really important. Even if it's a cloth mask, it is still going to provide some protection because you're not spitting droplets everywhere and people aren't spitting them all over you. So important information that's gotten buried over the past few days, but to have a retraction in a prestigious medical journal, that's very, very important. So that's kind of what's going on right now with the Rona. We're going to kind of keep an eye on what's going on with the hydroxychloroquine study again. So we'll see what the outcomes are, hopefully with better data that can be analyzed. So that's what's going on with that. If anybody has any questions, you can always hop on. It is very important. It's obvious that people are not practicing social distancing. On the CDC website, I believe it says to wear a face covering only if you're going to be taking care of somebody with COVID. The problem is we don't know if we're carriers, and it's better to be safe than sorry. The state of Texas not only seeing an increase in cases, but also in deaths. That's important because it's warm out here. So this virus is still spreading in this heat. It's not dying off like we would assume it to be. Brazil is really skyrocketing still with their case numbers, but they're kind of leveling off. Australia is pretty flat, and they're going into the winter season, so that's kind of interesting, especially with the way the flu spreads. It's during the winter, so is this going to die off in the winter? We just don't know right now. I mean, there's a lot to be looked at, and pushing for data and forcing something to happen is not a good idea, because this is what happens right here. So that's why people don't trust what the WHO and the CDC are saying, because we have to keep retracting things. Forcing this to be done during a time of a pandemic is really not in our best interest. It's better off to wait for the science, to science the crap out of it. So this is a prime example of why pushing for a peer review and to push these data during a pandemic or outbreak of anything is not a good idea. It is really important to do the research and to have accurate data. So we have to quit bullying and pushing. These are the things that happen. it needs to stop, and we need to be able to do our jobs. Because California, increase in the cases, and we got to stop, man. We have to stop. We need to pay attention. So that's what's going on. If you have questions, shoot me a message, but that's the new information that we have on COVID for now.